There's an important day in the calendar tomorrow with the Reserve Bank deciding on potential interest rate cut, and we'll come to that in a moment. But just going over a little bit of what Peter Dutton said there, again talking about this suggestion of threatening to break up insurers, after we've seen some pretty serious increases to some insurance premiums in recent years. This is sort of a continuation of a coalition proposal to introduce what are called divestment powers or breakup powers for sectors like the supermarket sector, which in an ideal world in the coalition's view would never actually be used, but are there as a threat if they sort of exceed their limits, if they don't price things fairly. And so a suggestion that those same powers could be introduced for the insurance sector too. We've heard from the sector that they don't think that would work, they don't think that would help, and Treasurer Jim Chalmers was pretty dismissive when he spoke of, when he was asked about it about an hour ago as well. But lots of other cost of living discussions happening there. Again, talking about the coalition's nuclear policy, which they are particularly seeking to badge as a cost of living measure, suggesting that in the long term it would help to bring down power prices, although obviously we wouldn't be seeing a nuclear plant for at least a decade. And again, talking about the ongoing increases to the cash rate, 12 increases under the current government and 1 under the former government. The Reserve Bank's deciding tomorrow whether or not it will cut the cash rate. It's going to be a big day for figuring out what happens next for not only the government's prospects come an election time, but when the election might actually be. Most economists are tipping that there will be a rate cut of about 0.25 basis points, as are the big four banks, but it's not a certainty. The Reserve Bank is a famously cautious institution, and certainly Treasurer Jim Chalmers, when he was asked shortly about an hour ago what he thought of the matter, he repeated his often said line that he won't preempt, he won't predict, and certainly won't be taking it for granted, nor will he take for granted what it might mean for the federal election. So let's hear what Jim had to say.
Well, just like the decision tomorrow, we take no outcome in the election for granted. We know that this election will be really tight. It will be contested, and that's as it should be. Elections in this country are typically very tight at the federal level, and I expect that to be the case once again. I know that we'll see a lot of polls come out, and a number of you will publish polls on a weekly, if not more frequent basis. My job is to focus on the numbers in the economy, not the numbers in the polls, and that's what we've been doing.
So that's the Treasurer there saying that they won't be taking it for granted. It will be a close-fought election either way, but certainly would come as a major relief to the federal government. They'd be able to point to it as evidence that their economic plan is working as intended. Opposition leader Peter Dutton, though, remained pretty sceptical, saying, look, a rate cut, it certainly would be welcomed by Australians, but in his view, it's too little too late, saying that, the government was distracted while successive rate rises were decided on by the Reserve Bank. So here's what Peter Dutton had to say just a moment ago.
In the United States, in Canada, in New Zealand, in the United Kingdom, interest rates have already come down. And we would have expected interest rates to have come down here in Australia by now, but they don't, because, as the Reserve Bank Governor points out, the Albanese government spent an extra $350 billion, and that money in the economy is what is driving inflation. And it's not, as I say, not just your mortgage rates, but it's the price of groceries, and it's the price of electricity and the price of gas.
So coalition saying that people are feeling the pain of these rate rises would surprise no one to hear. But the Treasurer was arguing that the government's been able to cool inflation without hurting unemployment, keeping an unemployment rate of about 4%. Tomorrow will be a big day for deciding how the government is going to contest this election. If it gets a rate cut, you can expect expect people to start predicting that a federal election will be called any moment. If one was called this week, end of this week, it would mean a late March election day. You can expect cost of living to be a recurring theme throughout that. It's only a couple seats that will decide whether or not government can maintain a majority, fall into minority, or potentially lose government altogether. And so every seat is going to count, and those outer suburban seats where people are really feeling the pain of successive rate rises and several years of high inflation, it's going to be a huge decider tomorrow how that narrative plays out.